Today, we'll be looking at a verse from Mundaka Upanishad. This verse, present in the ancient Indian text, tells the story of two birds and is part of a set of three verses which talk about the relationship between the perceived and the one who perceives. The verse goes like this: two birds, united always and known by the same name, closely cling to the same tree. One of them eats the sweet fruit, the other looks on without eating.
द्वा सुपर्णा सयुजा सखाय समानं वृक्षं परिषस्वजाति तयोरन्यः पिप्पलं स्वाद्वत्ति अनष्टान्यो अभिचाकशीति अनश्नन्यो अभिचाकशीति.
This at first may seem like an innocuous verse, but in context of a philosophical frame which is present surrounding the verse in Mundaka Upanishad, the verse acts as an affirmation of a particular philosophy over others by forming a subtle critique of all alternate philosophies to its own. Let's look at the parts of the verse one by one and try to understand the implication of it. The first phrase, two birds united always, presents a philosophical problem of identity. When it is the case that two things are always united and inseparable, the answer is obvious: when they are the same thing. For if the two things were different, the difference between them would be realizable either by means of physical separation or by means of linguistics. Let's take the first case. If the two things are distinct and their distinction is physically realizable, then they cannot be inseparable, for we can have the one without the other. Only when their distinction is not physically realizable, one can say that they have eternal unity. Yet if they are united always, why call them two instead of one? For while they are the same, they appear as distinct, and as such referred to as distinct. As such, while the things lack physical distinction, they possess a distinction because of perception. The next part of the verse says, and known by the same name. If there is no physical distinction, is there a conceptual distinction between the two things? If there was, they would not be referred to by the same name, as the name is the definition of identity, and same definition leads to same identity. The verse till now shows the inadequacy of dualistic theories. If you are wondering, there is no way dualistic theories have found to either show a physical way of separating the one fundamental component of duality from the other, nor the definitions of the two different components establish any conceptual distinction. That the appearance of the components as distinct to the observers is what is the primary force that convinces people of the distinction. Dualism relies entirely on distinctive perception. Substance dualists make the distinction of matter and mind, yet where they both coexist, they fail to show how they can be separated. In their theory, without brain the mind has no existence, for then it could be possessed by objects, and without mind no thoughtful process could take place in brain that makes the brain distinct from a normal computer. Yet if brain is perceived like a normal computer, then dualism gets defeated by materialism, for then the characteristics of thought would be reproducible by the inanimate, and the separate existence of the animate would be an unnecessary stipulation. And similarly, if mind could be perceived to retain the functions of thought and will while separated from the brain, as in the case of hypothesis of souls, then the brain is an unnecessary artifact providing no useful addition to the explanation of the world, aside from appearing different than the mind. Could there be linguistic distinction between mind and matter that is of importance? Both matter and mind exist in dualistic theories, so existence is not the differentiator between the two. In dreams, the world conjured up by mind seems as real as the world of physical reality. The appearance of reality is not the differentiator either. The essence is then argued to be distinct by invoking the distinction between the natural and the supernatural, where mind captures the latter realm. And yet the distinction is arbitrary because if supernatural is understood, then it is no longer anything but natural, for it is the part of the world. And if it is not understood, then how any distinction can be made, aside from the distinction based on our initial perception of the distinction? Holomorphic dualists make distinction of form and matter, yet in their theory the form accompanies matter, for that is what makes the matter have a specific set of essences. Without the form, the matter would not remain the same as it was before. No matter without form is possible, for any instantiation of matter that is purely not linguistic would contain within itself an instantiation of form. Form, on the other hand, whenever is supposed to have a possible existence aside from matter, like in case of souls and in personification of God, renders the inclusion of matter into the theory meaningless, for matter then grants no function to the entity that the form itself cannot, for if it did, then God would not be omnipotent. The attribute of imperfection is, however, generally attributed to the object by presence of matter, but without any function which matter controls uniquely, the idea of imperfection becomes redundant, for imperfection requires presence of telos, which requires presence of a unique function. Linguistically, the form and matter are not separable either, because under hylomorphic dualism, it is impossible to define one by referring to other in some way, for without the other, they have no grounds to define themselves. The next part of the verse goes like this: closely cling to the same tree. The unity of the two things is not just the unity of identity and the unity of nomenclature, but also unity of locus of existence. As such, they cannot be differentiated based on their association with locus of which they are part of. The unity is also manifested in reality, but not in appearance. The universe is the locus of existence of the two instantiated in the existence of each body. The tree is that universe, individual beings are the branches of the tree. Thus ends the first line of the first verse. The rest of it would be continued later.